This is All About Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related to Bitcoin, a little B for the currency, and Bitcoin, big B for the network. A collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Let's have a live look at Bitcoin. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index trading at 63,260 or so dollars. Bitcoin is trading pretty flat over the past 24 hours. The most reliable reference prices since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data. Let's take a look at some of our top stories. It's been a mixed day for the crypto markets as investors absorb the U.S. Central Bank's latest policy plan, which includes a formal announcement of the Federal Reserve's decision to begin tapering its unprecedented pandemic-era asset purchases starting this month. The $120 billion worth of asset purchases have provided a tailwind for Bitcoin since a growing number of investors see the cryptocurrency as a hedge against dollar debasement in the face of ultra-loose monetary policies. Meanwhile, the first American politician to accept their salary in Bitcoin may just be Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, who pledged to do just that on Election Day. Suarez was reelected in a landslide victory, capturing 79% of the votes cast on November 2nd. And Marathon Digital produced nearly 418 BTC in October, a 23% increase over the previous month, and plans to continue expanding its mining fleet. The publicly traded miner now holds more than 7,450 BTC worth, about $457 million. Rival miner Riot Blockchain saying it plans to increase its hash rate to 8.6 exahashes next year to capture over 11% of the Bitcoin network security. Overall, crypto mining stocks are outperforming other crypto-linked stocks amid Bitcoin's recent price rally. And finally, exchange-traded fund issuer Direxion withdrawing its application to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to list a short Bitcoin futures fund, a way to bet on the crypto's price falling. Complying with a request from the agency on October 26th, the day it was filed. Separately, a deputy from the Hong Kong Securities and Futures Commission saying the watchdog has received a number of requests to launch crypto ETFs. Joining us now to discuss is CoinDesk Director of Data and Indexes, Galen Moore in Boston. Always a pleasure, Galen. So, listening to the Fed remarks, no surprises there. It already seemed that this tapering was anticipated. Has it already been priced in?
Certainly no reaction from Bitcoin. I note Ether's up quite a bit, and along with the S&P 500 index, I think ahead of the chairman's remarks, the statement issued by the Fed came alongside a jump in the S&P, and that jump kind of took another leap during the course of these remarks over the past few minutes. So I think, the market reacting positively, not necessarily to new information, but to just a sense of confidence in staying the course. So
you have a chart actually. We have a chart on the correlation of the markets.
Sure.
Now, so crypto markets have been mixed, so are traditional stocks. Perhaps there's a correlation today, and here we see it slightly rising, it seems.
Yeah, this is Bitcoin's correlation with the S&P 500. It's a correlation of daily returns, 90-day correlation. So, a fairly conservative look, not really looking at what's happened just over the past week or month, but really over a 90-day period. And, creeping up steadily. I think, I kind of tend to divide correlation into basically three categories, like not there at all, weak, or strong. And once you get above 0.3 or below negative 0.3, you get into the kind of strong correlation category. Into the weak correlation category in my book anyway. I think, correlations have to always be taken with a bit of a grain of salt, and they're kind of rough looks at what's happening, but certainly you're seeing Bitcoin and Ether move.
Let's take a look at the ETH chart.
Yeah, Ether's where you really see it's sort of it's an even stronger correlation there, and you can if you sort of look at the day-to-day move, the movement today upward alongside the Fed announcement and the statement there, that's significant. I think. how can you interpret that? Look, I mean, you have maybe more sophisticated investors who are paying more attention to Ether. That's certainly been the narrative of the past few months, and I think alongside that comes a view of it as a risk-on asset. You have investors who want to be in these assets when they're in a risk-on mode.
Well, ETH jumped to an all-time high yesterday, over $4,600. Do you think it's on its own merits with SHIB skyrocketing, as well as NFTs, the best performing subsector in the crypto industry, or is it only because it's following Bitcoin's path?
Well, look at Shiba Inu. It seems to have stalled, right? And I think that speaks to maybe we're in a situation where where Shiba Inu, where the retail investors that are participating in Shiba Inu, right, presumably, are not necessarily in the driver's seat. I think you're seeing a kind of a market where the gains in the market overall are coming from more sophisticated investors. And by the way, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ether hitting a new all-time high just within the past few minutes here on the strength of that move upward alongside the Fed announcement. I'm looking at the CoinDesk.com price page for Ethereum right now, and it is, it's showing a 24-hour
hitting an all-time high as we speak.
Yeah, $4,668.69.
All right, breaking news, folks.
I believe that's a new high watermark for Ether, and look, I think. It's a big question for Bitcoin. I mean, I think it's interesting to see what's happening with Ether, but the question for Bitcoin is, look, if it's treated as this risk-on asset, what does that do for the narrative vis-a-vis inflation? If you see, Bitcoin going up when there's a risk-on mood and down, you could certainly see, kind of the opposite start to take hold. The opposite narrative start to take hold with Bitcoin. And I don't know, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's certainly something to question, whether, Bitcoin will continue to have that sort of digital gold, rock solid kind of story.
I was going to mention this later, but Chainalysis came out with reports saying Bitcoin has to expand. It has to grow into Web3. It has to get into DeFi before becoming irrelevant. Something you agree with?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think, at least, I guess, speaking personally, I think there are different reasons to invest in different assets. Bitcoin has that narrative of being the gold-like, ownable digital commodity, right? That's not, gold doesn't change. Gold doesn't have to change. Gold is the same. So I think that's, in some ways kind of, as Bitcoin maybe has made some feints or slight moves in that direction, it may be sort of taking a risk in a way that it will take itself away from what it's meant to be. Ethereum is a very different, it has a very different quality. It's a bet on a kind of a future, a different way of computing, a different way of processing information. That to me seems like just a very different narrative from a narrative of something that you can actually sort of own and hold and verify yourself that exists on the internet. Let's
pivot toward ETFs. So Direxion, they wanted to get a short ETF, Bitcoin ETF approved. They've withdrawn that. Why?
Yeah, I love how you emphasize the dire in Direxion. I mean, look, I think I'd like to sort of say that perhaps the securities regulators are sensible of the very great risk in shorting Bitcoin, right? Like there is no way that we will let the U.S. retail
I dare someone Bitcoin. To do it.
That is a bridge too far, right? And I would concur. I think it's probably less to do with the short exposure and more to do with the leverage that's in that product. Notably, the push to next year of the decision on the Valkyrie leveraged ETF that came out yesterday, and I think no surprise then that Direxion took the action of withdrawing their application after that move by the regulator.
What about ProShares, BITO, the Bitcoin futures ETF that was approved by the SEC, the first one in the United States? How has it been performing?
It's been performing like a Canadian Bitcoin ETF, but with more volume. It seems to have topped out. Last I checked, which was this morning, at about 1.2 billion AUM, and that's comparable to the largest of the Canadian spot Bitcoin ETFs, and I think kind of reinforces the narrative that look, there's limited demand for a futures-based ETF. That said, the volume numbers continued, I think, being in the hundreds of millions daily, and that's pretty significant. Mm-hmm. So, not necessarily a sort of a perfect. It's a bit of a mixed story, I guess, in that way.
All right, we'll end it there. Galen, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. That was CoinDesk Director of Data and Indexes, Galen Moore. Coming up, Bitcoin price analysis with crypto index provider CF Benchmark.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
Bitcoin whales, or large investors with ample capital supply, appear to be buying again as inflation fears strengthen the case for investing in store of value assets. Large investors holding at least 1,000 BTC, snapping up 142,000 coins last week, taking the cumulative tally to nearly 200,000 BTC, the highest in 2021, according to blockchain analytics firm Chainalysis. Bitcoin rallied nearly 40% in October, hitting a record high of $66,975. CoinDesk Tom Cargabole saying renewed buying amid rising inflation expectations across the globe suggests investment is the primary use case for Bitcoin. JP Morgan analysts saying the perception that Bitcoin is an inflation hedge stems from Bitcoin's mining reward halving. The program code reduces the pace of supply expansion by 50% every 4 years, with a cap of 21 million Bitcoins in total, putting Bitcoin's monetary policy at odds with the Federal Reserve's decades of money printing. However, Chainalysis warning that Bitcoin needs to expand its footprint into crypto subsectors like Web3 and decentralized finance to remain relevant relative to Ether in the long run. Joining us now to discuss is Sui Chung, CEO of CF Benchmark, a cryptocurrency index provider. Hello there, Sui. Great to have you join us. So we're talking about the crypto markets just as Ether hits an all-time high, again over 4,600, right there now at trading at $4,641. ETH is breaking out. Bitcoin, on the other hand, it's taking a bit of a step back, or rather, it's trading pretty flat for the day. So I'm wondering about what's your take on ETH skyrocketing versus Bitcoin taking a breather or two?
Yeah, well, thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on. Yeah, I think that what we're seeing is a pretty well-trodden pattern whereby new highs are generally set by Bitcoin, and the other major cryptos follow a few days or a few weeks in its wake. So obviously Bitcoin hit its all-time high about 10 days ago, 11 days ago, and now Ether is following suit. And if history were to repeat itself, we may expect to see some of the other altcoins follow suit and perhaps see some price appreciation action.
We did see that actually with Solana earlier. Solana also reached all-time highs. So you think it's just following Bitcoin's path? It's not to do with ETH and its specific use cases with on NFTs, DeFi, as well as Sheepcoin going up.
Well, I think that for the entire ecosystem, for both Bitcoin and ETH, their underlying more fundamental story that is playing out in the institutional space. Certainly something that we encounter more and more, and that is, the digital gold narrative for Bitcoin, the inflation hedge narrative that you very articulately explained at the beginning of this segment. That is permeating the traditional finance sector. And then alongside that is the Web3 narrative, particularly borne out through the DeFi, the growth in DeFi and the DeFi ecosystem that has been built predominantly today on Ethereum. And that also is resonating with the traditional investor base. And so what you see are much more sophisticated views from traditional financial institutions around Bitcoin and its use cases and Ethereum and its use cases.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of the Fed's comments and its latest policy decision? They want to ease, they want to taper off the unprecedented bond buying, asset purchases that they've been doing during the pandemic era stimulus time. Could that make the investment environment less risk on, and potentially eliminate excess leverage or froth in the market?
I don't think that itself will change the path of interest rates too much, because the sort of tapering we're talking about, we're coming from basically very, very high levels of asset purchases, unprecedented in the history of the Fed, and slowing them down. So I don't think it's going to have a dramatic effect. And quite frankly, this may be closing the stable door after the horse has bolted, given the size of the Fed balance sheet and the fact that inflation is now running in the 4 to 5% range. That tapering, the tapering being considered may have a relatively limited effect, and the Fed and indeed all central banks around the world may indeed be behind the curve on this one.
Mm-hmm. So we got to wrap it up, but before we do, just want to get your outlook on Bitcoin for the end of the year. Do you have a price target?
Well, as an index provider, we're not in the business of forecasting or having price targets. But what I would say is that with the advent of the ETF, the ProShares ETF in the US, the recent announcements by the Australian regulators of crypto ETPs, you just mentioned there that earlier in the segment that Chung regulator is seeing filings. So we're likely to see more exchange traded instruments with mass appeal, mass access, that will come to market, and that can only be good for the Bitcoin price.
Exciting times. Thank you, Sui, for joining us. That was CF Benchmark CEO Sui Chung. That's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and we'll do it all over again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in New York as well for First Mover. You're watching CoinDesk TV.